Hello DVR, I'm leesusss and welcome to probably my last video for a while on Death Road's the test edition of the game. I'd like to make this a bit more of a semi-review of the game, and also some footage in the background of me getting to the end and facing off against the boss. Spoiler, not beating him, but you know, we can talk about the boss at least a bit at the end as well. This game is one I like a great deal, and any criticisms I'm putting here are hopefully more purely constructive. You know, you can be critical about things that you like, and I do like this game a great deal. The aesthetic and mechanics and everything else. Everything about the game, I love it. It's wonderful. But it doesn't mean I don't want things to get better, and that's why the devs have released test versions of the game, so you and I can play it, and then let them know through Steam or the Discord what we think of it, and what we'd like to see next, and what we hope we'd improve of it. So I've played quite a few hours of the game now, and I'm hopefully in a comfortable enough position to do that. So going through the various parts of the game in stages that I've been thinking about, and the different parts that I like to address. The first is probably on something that Aki's already brought up already, with a comment on one of my YouTube videos, and also on the devs Discord as well, which is that about the buying items that improve the health of your car or the handling, and a lot of items that you can get do that. They increase the health, or the maximum health of your car, or they increase how well your car handles on the road. Now, there's a slight difference in these, and I didn't realise until a bit later that when you pick up an item that increases the health, it only increases the maximum health. It doesn't increase your current health of your vehicle. And I find this a bit of a downside. One of the devs explained why they did this, and what I suspected the reason was, which is that they're worried that people will game the system and use the increase and decrease to increase their health and buffer their health, or heal them to some degree. And I understand that, but it is also something that has been gotten around a lot of the games, so I hope they'll be able to bring this mechanic in. Otherwise, as far as I can see it, you're paying twice really for an item that increases your health, because you get the increase in your maximum health, and then to actually get the benefit in your own health, you have to go and get your car repaired and have enough scrap to be able to do that. So you've got a double cost to an additional cost to buying items like that. Whereas an item that increases your handling has the effect immediately. Anyway, that's my comment on that. And I'm saying the devs have seen it, and hopefully that's something they can fix in the future. The next one is about traction and loss of traction, rather skidding. So this is a fact of life in this game. You use up too much of your handling, and your car goes out of control, as done the enemies. But there's the critical factor here I'm thinking about is how collisions occur when skidding. So if you intentionally ram another vehicle, one of the mechanics of the game, what happens is you apply damage to that other vehicle, and you reduce their handling to some degree, and vice versa. If the enemy hits you, that's what happens. No damage occurs to the vehicle doing the damage, which is obviously a decision made by the devs. I mean, in some games, certainly, to ram is sometimes in a ship, whether a sailing ship or a spaceship-based game or a car game, to ram another vehicle can sometimes be seen as a desperation move. Something you do that you're going to take damage yourself, but you're doing it to damage the enemy more, hopefully. Maybe you've got a massive ship, and although you take some damage, you crush the opponent. That sort of thing. But in this game, no. Potentially ramming someone, you don't take any damage. However, if you reduce the traction, if the traction of the vehicle being rammed is reduced, not the traction, sorry, the handling of the vehicle being rammed is reduced to zero, it goes into a skid, and skids are random. They're going to go generally from left and right of the car, up and down the lanes, or they can make you fall back and lose gears as well, and various other things. But in doing that, it's completely random, and sometimes if this happens, you can collide with other vehicles. In fact, it's quite common. But when this happens, when the vehicle losing control smashes into another vehicle, the vehicle being hit takes damage, but the vehicle that's out of control doesn't. And this has a few effects. So it makes ramming as a tactic to damage other cars, much more risky as far as that, and one that's hard to mitigate. It is possible to gain armour in the game, but there's actually not many cards you can do that with. More about this when we come to the boss, but there's not actually many cards you can't draw into them very easily, so it's hard to mitigate if you worry that they're going to crash into you. So particularly ramming from behind, there's a fairly good risk that the vehicle, especially in a higher gear, is going to come back and hit you. And it only counts against you, so you almost might think, why should I ram at all? You know, you can do a lot of damage with the higher level ramming, especially when you can push them into lanes, different lanes. You can really smash and bounce cars around, but there's still a lot of risk to you. And of course, this game is about absolutely minimising the risk. This is not Faster Than Light, where you can soak up damage on a shield. Armour's rare, and you're going to take damage, and it's hard to repair that. And there's always more enemies with quite a lot of health. Sometimes, 40 health enemies are not uncommon in the game. A couple of 40 health enemies can really wear you down. So the point is, what I'm saying is that I think that if you are losing control and smash into another vehicle, either it should be that both vehicles take damage. Maybe you could say that the second vehicle takes, the one that's still in control will lose it. It takes less damage because you're braced and ready for it, maybe. Well, you take no damage at all. In other words, that the car losing control only takes the damage and not the opponent, not the person who's caused them to lose control. Anyway, this is what I think would make it a bit more fair and make it more viable. Smashing your car into the cars is great fun, and it's very much in the nature of the game, the spirit of the game, and I find it a bit frustrating when this happens. To get yourself in a position where you can smash into the other car, and then they bump into you twice, and you take as much damage as they have. To some degree. Okay, so that's running. Next one I've raised up on the Discord, which is about placement of vehicles. So I queried, I've started as a trend, and I wasn't sure if it was my bias or not, but I wanted to check with the devs, and I said, if you meet opponents that have their primary weapon facing forward, is that enemy vehicle always placed behind you on the road when you encounter them, and vice versa? So say that a vehicle with a grappling hook as their main weapon, and a lot of the early enemies only have one weapon. The grappling hook fires forward, so they are located behind you, and if they have like oil dispersers and flamethrowers, the vehicle tends to be ahead of you on the road. And then one of the devs confirmed, yes, that's how they're positioned. It's almost like the enemies always have perfect positioning on you. Now, this becomes a particular problem, as far as I can see, when it comes to, for a start, when you start the game, you are always lacking a weapon in one direction. With the current vehicles that are available, you don't have a vehicle to the rear, or you don't have a vehicle facing directly forward. As it goes on, even when you have multiple weapons, maybe placed in different, every angle on your vehicle, often you could be bracketed by two other vehicles. You encounter two enemies quite regularly. One can be above and one can be behind. And this game, as I see it, is much like it's a dogfight. You're a dogfight. You're always chasing for the angle on the enemy. And you get behind them, get the angle so you can hit them, and they can't catch to you. And there's lots of tactics around that. I'm certainly no good at playing any flying games, but I've seen plenty of people and I understand that's how it works. And this game is the same. You've got to get positioning. Early on, I find that to have a successful battle in melee or a small skirmish with other vehicles, you don't do much firing at the start. Maybe a little bit of opportunistic if you can, but mostly you are manoeuvring to try and get maybe an angle on them, but also to get out of their way, especially when you're facing two vehicles, which we've already said, there's one ahead and one behind you. They both have perfect beats on you, and they're almost certainly going to have their some cards available to hit you with their primary weapons, which have already angled your way. It's not going to take much manoeuvring to get a line on you. And sometimes, luck of the draw with the cards, even with card cycling for better cards, you can be stuck, being able to do very little in the first few rounds of combat, and you can get hit very heavily by these two perfectly placed enemy vehicles, damaging you a great deal. And you could say it's the luck of the draw, and if there was a way of dealing with that, compensating that with that, it would be great. But there isn't. Once you take a lot of heavy damage in the game, you're in serious dire straits. Of course, it takes a lot of effort to get that health back, and you might never get that health back, and that run could be scuppered to some degree, and you'll meet a lot of these fights. So I think the positioning should be random, is what I'm saying. Occasionally, but later in the game, you will meet enemies with multiple weapons to the side and coming back to say that this fight was particularly easy because the enemies were facing completely the wrong way. It can happen, in the same way it can happen to you. And it shouldn't always be this perfect ambush situation where they're always ready for you, they're always prepared, they've always perfectly lined you up as this expert racer. Every time you meet these vehicles, they're already in the right positions to attack you. Perfect. It should be more random, and it's more fun to have that. So as you have it's more part of the luck of the draw again. You have lucky runs and bad runs based upon the positioning. And just because you're lucky enough to have a better positioning on them, it doesn't mean you're going to be okay. The enemy vehicles are very well capable of what your weapons do. They're very capable of they're not stupid, they're very capable of manoeuvring backwards and do what they can with their cards to smash into you and get a better angle on you. So I think that would improve things a great deal. Otherwise, before we go to the boss, I was trying to think about the overarching tactics of a way to have a good run with the game. I'm talking to my oldest about this. He's an expert in card games like this. He's played a lot of these different ones. He's very strategically minded. He often sees good, not even exploits, but the best way to use mechanics in games. And it's always very useful to talk to him about how he's doing particular things, how he's using a particular run, what mechanics he's using to make this one easy. And we were looking at the mechanics you can do in this game and what might be a viable strategy. I had one idea early on, which was about the angle of the weapons that you use. So initially, and probably in some of my early videos, I was saying, well, you've got to make sure you've got weapons facing every direction. So that whichever angle the enemy's coming from, you want to be better retaliate. And I thought, maybe that's a bad idea. Because just because you've got weapons that face rearwards, sidewards, and forwards, it doesn't mean that you'll have those cards in your hand. And as you move to higher quality items, you get more and more cards in this, and you get a bit of a deck bloat type effect. Like when you've got, when they say when you play card games, you shouldn't have too many cards in your deck. There's some trash in there. You don't want to be drawing that. You want to be drawing. There's no point having lots and lots of cards for every variety. You want the right cards at the right time, and having a smaller deck, in fact, helps a great deal for that. So I thought, okay, what if we just have weapons that all face forward? Because that's in every position on your vehicle you can put items. You can't always have things that always face backwards, but you can generally speaking have a lot of weapons that all face forwards. So what you can do is make sure that you try to get your position. You've got a simple positioning with your vehicle. You always want to be behind the enemy, and then you've got so many weapon cards that go forwards. You've got a very high chance of having to hit them with something based upon what you've drawn. And that, to some degree, does work. I found it just gives you more cards to play with that are going to draw out, and you've got more chance of being able to do damage. It doesn't work all the time. Sometimes it's very hard to get behind an enemy, and that can be a real struggle. But if you can do that works a great deal. The other thing is the various mechanics in there about the weakening. So, for example, we've seen rage cards in there which are very nice that buff the damage you do. Punch cards that do similar things as well. I very much like the rumble, which is like a poison effect that constantly eats away at the enemy's health. So for example, the early weapons you get on one of the cards is speakers, only does 4 damage, but it puts a bunch of rumble on there, and in fact over time that ticks away, and over several rounds, which is what most races take, you do a lot more damage with that very cheap attack than an instant attack of slightly higher cost and initially higher damage. Overall, the rumble eats away for longer. But I was trying to find one that's a really good mechanic for doing this overall. And the rage one is very good, as are cards where you can lock down certain actions. So certain cards you can use where you smack into a vehicle, typically, and because you've done that, they're no longer able to use speed up or slow down cards. Or they're able to use turning cards. And this could be a very viable mechanic. I like the idea is you could get the right angle, smack into them, high risk because you're getting close to them, but you are able to lock down what they can do, and then maybe put one of the enemies out of action for a while and focus on the other, or just restrict them in their movement maybe even kill them. But the trouble is, I found that there's not enough cards in these sites. That's the problem we have with this. So, for example, like the armour cards, there's a couple of different armour cards you can find, like bulk up and various things like that, but they're very limited number, so you can't reliably. If I'm going to put myself in a lot of danger, like with the final boss, I can't easily reliably draw into those again and again, even with a heavy cycling deck. It's just not possible. There's not enough cards in your deck to be able to do that. So I haven't really found a good mechanic that I'm looking for that can be very reliably used to say, okay, this is a really good way of doing it. But one closest to it, in fact, is the rocket booster. I particularly like that one. That's the booster that's a lot of damage and a large cone behind you, and it either pushes the enemy back or it pushes you forward. And I've done this in a number of races. You tend to find it later in the game, and I've often taken this thing, and I can just keep ahead of the enemies, hit them every now and then with weapons like that. Maybe if I've got a, something like another rear-firing weapon like the rocket launcher, fires slightly to the side, I can do a little bit of damage with that. I can let them catch up and then knock them back. But the point is, it's easy to control the enemy very well. And even though the races can go longer, in the very late races when you're facing particularly dangerous enemies, it's a good way of dealing with them. Also, by the way, also adds rumble to them as well, so it really eats into an opponent quite effectively. But there's not many others like this. I haven't been able to find good mechanics like this. Maybe it's something that the devs can develop more. You won't want the same exploit to work every single time, but I think anyone who's played things like Faster Than Light knows that we all find different tactics to develop as we go through, based upon what we find. This time we're going to have a very heavy healing run where we can constantly repair damage, and super shields that never get broken through. We are able to find these mechanics, but I haven't been able to do it with this game so far. But if you found anything like this, you've played this game, it'd be good to hear it. And now finally onto the boss. So I finally managed to squeeze my way through the boss. I've got about 50 health left at this point here, and that's effectively about half health, because I think my health is has been increased to quite a degree by the items I've picked up. But from my initial health, I'm down from about 110 down to 50 or something like that. And I've got some good weapons on me. So, but the boss. Well, first of all, let me say that I have slipped a bit. I'm afraid. I'm afraid I cheated. I'm sorry. This is the only point that I cheated in the game. I wanted to analyse the boss's moves and weapons as much as possible. So I in fact restarted this fight a number of times. Yes, you can still restart fights. I discovered this by accident. If you quit out of a fight, back to the menu and then restart again, then that battle restarts. Start again, so you can effectively redo this. I promise I've not done this at any other point in the game. It really ruins the fun if you do that kind of thing, but I did do it for the boss, so I could view multiple. I didn't want to get killed too quickly. I wanted to be able to see a number of times how the boss does things, because I knew I wasn't going to beat it. Look at that health bar. I got it down to the second stage, and that's as much as I could do. But anyway, here's what the boss can do as far as I've seen it so far. So there's no weapons to the side, which is interesting to know, but I was reserving judgment to see if it suddenly gains some weapons sideways later. But the point is that it has a forward weapon and a rear weapon. The forward weapon is much like whatever they're called, like the plasma guns, where they do damage and they also cause you to lose handling. And I think they are slightly longer range than normal, as is the reverse, which is a laser plasma something out the back, which does the same thing. It does damage and it does things to your handling. So it's quite hazardous to approach the vehicle from the front or the side or the rear, because even if you maintain enough handling to be able to deal with the damage there, it's hard to have enough armour. Like I said before, it's not enough armour cards to be able to reliably soak up that damage. So the point was, I was thinking either I keep away from the enemy or I approach it from the side. However, the boss also is extremely manoeuvrable. So I haven't analysed the cards that they have, but I have a lot of high-level manoeuvring cards, much like the ones you can pick up later in the game, where you can maybe move multiple, like 3 times sideways, or you can bash 3 times to the side. So in fact, approaching from the side is also extremely dangerous, because the boss can really knock you around. This might be somewhere where you could possibly, if you were lucky, use a card that would reduce their manoeuvring, so they were locked, they weren't able to turn. I don't know if that's possible or not, but that's what I saw. But approaching from the side is not really any safer than that. And also, you can't keep too far to the head or behind because the boss is able to move so fast, forward and in reverse, and also the range of their weapons also limits them out. I guess it might be possible. I did not speak about one mechanic, which is the burning mechanic, which is the flamethrower one, which I think is the only one that has that, which is where it burns up cards in the hand, so it reduces your hand size. And I guess potentially that could cause the boss some problem, building up a lot of burn. You could maybe take some high risks early on to put a lot of burn on the boss, and then cycle back through to get armor and everything else to keep them fairly locked down in movement and firing. I don't know. You're going to have a good health pool for this, but the point is you can't get far enough away from them to avoid taking damage. That's what I found so far. Also, it's a very high risk game, so in lots of races I would deliberately have the when the enemy leaves the arena, they're behind you, not just on the screen. You can be up to 3 steps away before you escape from them. If you try to do that with the boss and they for some reason decelerate, you automatically lose, which I think is what happens at the end of this video. I lose because the boss gets too far away. So it's very dangerous getting that far away. But it's very hard because you can't be too close, you can't be too far away. You're going to have some sort of mechanic to reduce their damage, and a fairly substantial health pool, I would say as well. 50 is not nearly enough. I think even with 150 it might be quite hard with some of these. The boss does so much damage, which is what you'd expect from them. At some point we did get to the second stage where drones start to come out, which is reasonable. These are buffing and debuffing drones, so they debuff you and they buff the boss. This would make probably assaulting from the side extremely dangerous. But there you go. But that's it. That's what I've come to so far. I lost to the boss, but at this point here, although I love the game, I can't really see me beating the boss. Even getting to the end of the game, where the boss is with a reasonable amount of health, is quite tricky. Lots and lots of RNG. There's nothing wrong with that, but I found that I feel quite impotent. I feel quite, powerless to do much about it. I'm almost too reliant on RNG with these things, and it just needs some balancing, I think. But there we go. What do you think? I'd love to hear what other people think about this game. I've played it to see. Maybe I'm missing a trick. It's entirely possible. I'm quite a simple man sometimes. I miss these sometimes the really clear tricks on how to get this done. Has anyone beaten the boss? If they have, please tell me. I'd love to know. Usually I don't want to see spoilers. I don't want to know about these things. But this time, I think I do. I'd love to know what a mechanic, what a method might be to deal with it. Is it purely RNG? Have you got a hard and fast method to a more, not a hard and fast method, but a more reliable strategy to do it? But there you go. Great game. I'm looking forward to the next update a great deal, and I hope you enjoy me watching this. The videos weren't too long and boring. I didn't cut too much out, but I shall leave it for now, and I hope this is useful criticism, and I'll be looking forward to play some more games in the future. Take care of yourself, stay well, and I'll see you again next time.